It's August 17th, 2023. Let's see what's happening in the world, and we'll see which of our panelists join us and what they have to say about the different things that are happening in the world. I don't think we have a special guest scheduled for today, but we're going to see what's happening around the world. Hillsong Church founder Brian Houston has been acquitted of covering up his father's child sex crimes. So that's one of the things that I am seeing. So the mega church founder was acquitted of hiding the sexual abuse committed by his father. So that is something that I'm sure that that particular church will be glad to hear, and all along those lines. And definitely Biden is hoping to tighten South Korean Japanese bond at a Camp David event that he is holding. So he is looking to try to cement a fragile truce between the various countries and looking at Asian security. So that's something that a lot of people will be paying attention to around the world as well. The BRICS nations are to meet in South Africa, seeking to blunt Western domination. So BRICS expansion is backed by China and Russia to be in focus next week. And definitely that is something that I know a lot of people have been talking about, even on this show, is what's up with BRICS and how BRICS can impact the economies of the world and all in that space. I know that sometimes Sasha joins me, and we'll see if he comes in a little bit and all along those lines. But if that is the case, we do know that there is a evacuation that is going on in Canada as the Canadian wildfires are nearing a city in that area. So Yellowknife evacuation is ordered. So definitely that is what's going on, as that particular area is having the skies turned red and all in that space. So thousands are leaving Yellowknife as that wildfire approaches. And at least 10 are dead in Malaysia after a plane crashed into an expressway. The plane crashed into the expressway, and so far there are 10 fatalities after the private jet crashed into a motorbike and car in Malaysia. So that is something else that we're seeing in the news as well. Coming back to Ukraine and Russia, the ship leaves Ukraine despite a threat of attack by Russia. So, and apparently Ukraine has rendered 5 major Russian vessels inoperable. Navy says that count could rise. So that's something that we're seeing in the news as well. So that is definitely something that folks are paying attention to in that space and all along those lines. And I'm sure that when Sasha comes in, he'll have some more information in regards to that and in regards to how the war is going in that space. So we'll definitely be interested in to see how the conversation goes when we talk about that as well. So it looks like Ukrainian Su-25 fighter jet was shot down in Donetsk, and definitely NATO chiefs say that Putin has underestimated the alliance that is going on with the West, and Russia has unleashed missiles on Western Ukraine, killing and wounding civilians in that area. And apparently there is a Russian effort to build 6,000 attack drones with the help of Iran. So that is something else we're seeing in that part of the world as well. And definitely a lot of other things are taking place, and we'll get to a number of these things that are going on and get folks' thoughts about that, as well as, matter of fact, it looks like Ukraine has recaptured a small village as Russian forces have retreated. So that is something that is going on in a liberated part of that country as well. So definitely we are seeing a lot of conversation about the war between Ukraine and Russia and all along those lines. So we'll definitely get to some other conversations, and I might get to some other things that are going on in the world. I think today is Independence Day 2023, and the Indian Prime Minister Modi has shared a Memorial Independence Day moments of celebration. So he gave a speech and was definitely a reflection on India's role and its contributions to the world. So that is something that if Steve comes by, he may have some thoughts about that as well. And over there in Germany, they have unveiled a bill to legalize cannabis. So we know we have a show on Wednesday that deals with that issue, Weed Wednesday, and all in that space. So Jeff Eichen might be interested to know that the German cabinet has okayed a landmark bill over legal cannabis use, and it'll allow adults to keep 25 grams of that particular substance and all along those lines. So it'll be interesting to see what goes on in that space. A new Paraguay leader has reopened the Jerusalem embassy within a year, according to Israel. And Secretary Holland leads a U.S. delegation for the inauguration of Paraguay President Pena. So definitely does look like that is a new government is coming in that part of Latin America and all along those lines. The new Paraguay president has stressed the South American country's ties with Taiwan at its swearing in ceremony. So that is something that I know a lot of people will be interested in, as well as what is going on in Latin America, as well as what is happening in Europe, Asia, Africa, and a number of other places as well. It does look like extreme water stress is faced by countries home to a quarter of the world's population. So that's what is happening, and that is definitely going to impact a lot of folks. Home is Here's where the water is running out of the world, and there are a couple of countries. I'll see if I can't pull those up later, but it is definitely looking like it is impacting a number of countries that are going on. And, water is definitely a necessity in our lives and all along those lines. So I know that people are being concerned about that and are wondering about the shortage of water as well. So looks like the Middle East and North African regions are having the highest level of water stress in the world. And definitely looks like climate change is shifting traditional precipitation patterns, making the regions drier and reducing their already scarce water population. So that is definitely something that I am sure will be a concern to a number of people in all of that way. By the way, it's also impacting the United States because apparently Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Nebraska, California, and Idaho are using more water than they receive each year, depleting the groundwater reserves to support farming and industrial use. So, like I said, it can be impacting even us here in the West as well. So, that is something that I saw in the news. And apparently, speaking of climate and all along those lines, it looks like the climate got us some politicians and others in trouble and all along those lines, because I did see that that was a part of what was taking place in the U.S. as well, because there was some criticism about what was being said about the Maui wildfire. So that was something that I did see as well, because apparently one of the major networks said that it could not be accredited to climate change, and they got some pushback for that. So there was definitely some pushback in that regards and all along those lines. So definitely it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out and what goes on in that space. And of course, a lot of people are paying attention to what is happening with Trump and the Trump investigations and all along those lines, because even a Texas woman was charged with threatening a federal judge overseeing the Trump January 6th case and all in that kind of way. So it'll be interesting to see. We see more things along those lines and in that kind of way. But I'm going to bring up my esteemed panel. There was a number of other things that I saw that were in the news that we may get back to as well. And it looks like, speaking of the presidential race, that Pence is posed for a showdown with Trump. So maybe he's trying to find a way to see that he can make a comeback, because right now he is significantly behind Trump, and despite the fact that there are some that they're saying that he is the GOP's best bet, but is definitely there's other folks that are saying that both he and DeSantis are having hard times and might even wind up dropping out of the race at some point or another. But it'll be interesting to see what folks have to say about that and all along those lines. And Trump's legal advisors are urging him to cancel a press conference to refute the Georgia charges. So they are trying to get him, looks like, out of the public limelight and all in that space. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in that regards. And North Carolina has overridden a veto to ban trans athletes from competing in women's sports, putting that law into effect. So the ban on gender affirming care for North Carolina minors is also taking place in that veto. And all along those lines, I think there was even some vetoes that were regarding school choice and a number of other issues as well. But like I said, I'm going to bring in my esteemed panelists and see what they've got to say about a number of things that are going on. I've got Lee Newton Rhodes with me, and I've got Sasha Starr with me, and I've got Jatovi with me as well. And it looks like Shaquille is here, but he's off camera. So as soon as he gets on camera, we'll bring him on as well. But like I said, that was just some of the news items that I was seeing, and I know a lot of people are paying attention to what is going on in the whole world of the political landscape and with the Trump indictments and everything else in that space. But definitely any thoughts that folks have, including apparently Biden trying to tighten his relationships with our Japanese.
Good morning, Mark. I just want to start. Can I start on an upbeat mode? It was posted in the news this morning. 60 survivors were found in Maui. They were in a house for a week. It's great news. I love it. I'm happy for them. I just don't get it. What were they doing for over a week, hiding in a house, not walking outside, going anywhere? Is it secluded and they couldn't see from helicopters? Well, no one has phones, no communication over a week.
But like I said, if you know from, since you wanted to keep it on a lighter note and everything, there are folks that are very much in the gaming space and in a number of other space. You can find all kinds of things to do in a house for an entire week without trying to
go outside.
Hey, like I said, think about the COVID. During the pandemic, a lot of people were inside for days on end.
No, I get that. But after the fire stopped, not to look outside, neighbors to see, go for a walk, fresh air. I don't know. I'm glad they had food and shelter and stuff like that. I'm happy for them.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Like I said, I do know that, and you're right there. A lot of times people will have that whole notion of cabin fever. And so you would think that they would have come out after the cabin fever and been more
right.
But there is a lot of things that are keeping our folks inside. And I also don't know the age of the folks that were there. And it might have been a family of varying ages. But yeah, I see where you're going. But, with cabin fever, a lot of times people will go out and head out. But there's other folks that will sit there and enjoy the amenities of what they've got in the house, whether that's TV, whether that's video games, whether that's their phone communications. So like I said, they could have been having a whole party. We can't even talk about what other.
I hope other people turn up also alive and well.
Yeah, hopefully that will be the case and everything, but it'll be interesting and all in that space. By the way, in another story that I just saw, British Museum is saying that they have fired a employee after the alleged theft of some artifacts in that area. So definitely, we hope that our treasures are kept in place, but sometimes people might decide to be less than scrupulous and all in that space. So I'm glad that they have definitely caught this person and they are imposing emergency security measures after staff members allegedly just stole the priceless artifacts and everything. So I'm thinking that maybe they just walked out with them, but who knows? But that would be.
It's very hard to stop inside jobs at banks and museums.
Yeah, that's true. Because like I said, if there's inside, it's hard to regulate them and to know how to regulate them and everything. And since you were talking about good news, you'll be glad to know that in that same line of people being rescued, that there hopefully going to be some rescues going on off of Cape Verde, because I know that there's been some migrants that they are fearing are dead off of that area, but hopefully maybe they will have the similar kind of luck that the ones you were talking about in Maui, and then they might be found, but it's very much unlikely in this case. So hopefully that'll be something that will turn in a more positive direction, because right now they're saying that they are feared dead after the boat carried asylum seekers that were looking to find asylum off of the Cape Verde area and everything. So they were found drifting. So we'll see how that story plays out as well. Did I see that I had Shaquille on or not? No, he's still not with us and everything, because I was going to ask him about the radioactive material, because I saw that there was some nuclear scares that saw dozens of officers swarm a Amcliffe apartment, and radioactive material was found as Australian border forced a raid over there in Sydney and everything. So it says hazmat crews were deployed at a home near the Sydney airport. And speaking of, we always talk about development and things that are being developed and the wonders of the development, but sometimes it is not prepared. They're not always as safe as we think they are, because the world's longest tunnel has closed to train passengers after a derailment. So that is something that is going on in the whole area around Switzerland. So the Gotthard Rail Tunnel, which is the world's longest, is going to be closed for months after that derailment that took place in that area. So it looks like there is some concern about some of these super speed railways and other things. And I know even here in North Carolina and around the country, there is a desire to get that, to make people be able to get around from, say, California to New York much quicker and everything. But if they are not developed safely, then it could be problematic. And that's what it looks like that happened in that part of the world. Because from my understanding, and many of you on the show, or at least Sasha, and I think you, Lee, have traveled more around the world than I have even come close to. And I do know that those rails, particularly in Europe, are a lifeblood. So for them to be off for 2 months seems like that would be a major concern. But like I said, not having traveled to that part of the world, I'm not 100% sure, and all along those lines. But it'll be interesting to see what goes on in that space. But any thoughts about safety of rail and the safety of the world transportation? Lee?
Yeah, I just saw a story this morning on AOL in New Jersey about a fish going on a transformer. I'm trying to find it again now. And they had to shut down power. Wow. It doesn't seem, something seems off on that.
Yeah,
you're talking about, here it is. Thousands lost power after an unexpected animal fell in a transformer. Like, what's up with that?
Yeah, who knows? I mean, I always remember that there were, stories, particularly in New York. You're familiar with some people say it's mythology, some people say it's real, of, literally alligators that were found in people's bathrooms and toilets and other things that just mysteriously appeared, that I don't know that you want that happening in your house. But that was all pre-COVID, and I don't know if they became even more adapted to being seen and everything. But it is definitely something that is quite scary, I would imagine, if you are going in that space and all along those lines. But like I said, and some of that they say is mythology, urban legend. But whether it's urban legend or not, with only those that were impacted would know, and all in that space. But it'll be interesting to see if it is urban legend or not. Looks like Sweden has raised their terror threat level to the second highest following a recent Koran burning. So definitely that is something that is going on in the news, and people are concerned about that.
Yeah, Mark, could you explain something to me? I think it's horrible and reprehensible of people to burn other people's religious books. Maybe I'm missing something, but putting it as it may, why would someone take revenge on that with, physically threaten someone else's life just because they did something that you think is reprehensible?
Yeah, like I said, a lot of people do things that I can't figure out why they do them, and all in.
Most wars were fought over religion and money.
Right.
I'm not disagreeing with you, Toby. That's probably true. But if someone, in the museum paints a picture of Jesus or Muhammad or Moses or something that you don't like because they did what they did. I mean, we had that a few years ago in Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Museum. There was an artist with portrayed Jesus with urine and something like that, whatever. I don't get it. I don't know why they put it in the museum. I think it's just but to threaten someone over that, just don't promote it. Just don't go to the museum. Don't, whatever it is, write an editorial if you want. Call the person out, but to harm them physically, I just don't get that. And you shouldn't go around being Korans, but at the end of the day, so what?
I mean, again, I mean, we both are on that same page, not understanding of why people do things. But yeah, most wars are fought over religion and money, and people take those things to heart.
Jacoby, when you say money, I'm assuming you're inserting oil there also.
Well, that's money.
Yeah.
So
it's a form of money, definitely, and people do go, and not just for oil, but diamonds and other goods, because sometimes it is the resources, and the resources can add up into money, or that is how they make their money, and all along those lines. Hey, Shaquille, I had a question for you, and it actually deals with another part of the world, because I know that in certain shows you have talked about your certain political views, and I think that you've said it on some issues, not saying all, you come down on the libertarian side, and the Argentinian leader Milei is saying that he can that Argentina can be saved with libertarian economics, and he's saying that he's going to balance the budget within months, according to his advisors, and apparently the IMF is in touch with him and all along those lines. So I was just wondering, is this a trend that we're going to see in the world, some more libertarian kind of views, and is it possible to definitely save a country within that kind of framework, and is it possible to balance a budget within months? Because he's saying he's going to balance their budget within months, and I know that here in the U.S. we talk about balancing budgets just about every year, and we're nowhere near balancing most of the budget. So I just wanted your take, because when I saw that and the libertarian twist of it, I was like, I got to ask Shaquille about this, because he is our person that knows much more about economics than I would argue any of us here. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
Well, look, I don't know really anything about South America. It's the only continent I haven't been to as yet. So I don't really know anything about what happens there politically. I think there will be a bit more of a trend towards libertarianism, because people on the left are not happy with the way that people on the right use the government, and people on the right are not happy with the way that people on the left use the government. And libertarianism seems like an easy solution to that. What I would say is that there needs to be a healthy balance between providing social services to people and not crushing business with too much regulation and too high taxes. So, a more centrist position may be the way that that some countries move. I certainly think that places like Sweden and Scandinavia are trending towards the right, and some other nations are trending towards the left. So, things are always in flux in politics.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I question what you just said. You're talking about corporations shouldn't have too high in taxes. What's the argument that corporations should have any taxes? Isn't it double taxation? And they pass the cost of taxation on the customer anyways.
So the argument that taxes are primarily paid by the shareholders and not by the company themselves is an argument that I understand. However, I think that in a country, especially like the United States, it's worth noting that many of the shareholders of many of the companies are located outside of the US. And so the tax credits or the imputation credits that they receive are then credited against their domestic returns without necessarily being credited against any US obligations.
Shaquille, maybe I wasn't clear. I apologize. I didn't mean shareholders. I meant customers. And then those who buy their products, it's the cost of goods plus taxes. Am I wrong? That they're going to charge for their goods.
Well, they're getting charged for goods plus sales taxes in places where there's a sales tax, if that's what you mean.
No, not sales tax. The corporations.
Well,
if they want to mix it up,
a corporation's tax is based on its net profits, right? After costs,
right?
Somebody has to pay that tax at some point. Now, corporations have a lot of way of sheltering those taxes, but I'm not sure that it would be a good idea to have a 0% corporate income tax if that's what's being proposed. I know that there has been a lot of people on the right that have proposed that, but as I said, I think when it comes to the fact that there are international people that invest into the United States, if you have a zero corporate tax, what you're going to end up doing is you're going to have economic activity occurring in the US that's not being taxed in the US.
It makes sense. Hey, Shaquille and Lee, when there is a major situation that goes on, I mean, some people would say that the government's doing what I'm getting ready to ask, but this was actually, I'm assuming, private individuals. But if there is a major raid that gets a large money impact, won't that impact the economy as well? Because I just saw that CNN reported recently that 10 foreigners were arrested as 735 million in cash and assets were seized in Singapore, and they're saying that that's the largest money laundering probe uh, in terms of Singapore and everything. And they arrested 10 foreigners and seized $1 billion in assets, cash, cars, and homes. And it seems to me that that would be, I mean, to the average citizen, that seems like a lot of money. And that seems like that would disrupt the economy and everything. But not being an economist and not being all that averse in the knowledge of economy, and I would say that and definitely admit that. What do you say to folks hear those kind of numbers and they're going like, wait a minute, is this going to be disruptive of our overall world economy?
How much are you saying?
$1 billion.
Well, $1 billion's not. I mean, that's not a big part of the world's economy.
Okay, that's fair enough.
The world's economy sits somewhere around the 100 trillion mark. So I'm not sure that $1 billion is going to make much of a difference. And for the United States, for anyone in the US to say that when you guys are running, more than $1 trillion deficit every year and spending hundreds of billions of dollars at a time on different social programs, I'm not sure that $1 billion is going to make any real difference to anybody. Not to a person, but to any country. I don't think $1 billion.
There's a famous quote a number of years ago in the Hunt brothers, when I think the price of silver went down, said $1 billion ain't what it used to be.
That's right. That makes sense. $1 billion ain't what it used to be. And all along those lines, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out and how that is investigated. But I mean, that's a relatively few amount of foreigners. I mean, they only got 10, but they had a heap of a lot of money in this particular money laundering case. So it looks like Singapore was cracking down. And I do know that some certain parts of the world have been cracking down on the laundering that goes on in some societies and in with certain groups of people and everything. So it's good, I guess, to see that Singapore decided to crack down and everything. We're talking about the presidential race here in America, and I definitely want to get to that as well as the folks' thoughts about all these different things that are going on with that race. But it's pretty much a given right now, or at least everybody says it's a given, that it's going to be Biden against Trump in a rematch of 2020 and all along those lines. So that's what most people are saying. And then when I look down, I see that another part of the world, once again in Latin America, that their candidate won their runoff with 67%. So it looks like they don't have much of a contest either. And he is seen as a progressive, but he is leading in the polls ahead of their presidential election. So it looks like a lot of leaders, whoever they are or wherever they are having significant leads and are not giving up on those leads. So why do we find such a vast difference in those that are in front and those that are chasing them? Because I really thought that the DeSantis coming back to America, the DeSantis Trump race, or even Pence would have been much closer than it is. I thought that there might have been some people that would step out of the woodworks and maybe challenge Biden. Well, even though it's harder with an incumbent, but definitely on the Republican side, I thought it would have been much closer than it is right now. We still got plenty of time for that to change. And if he says some gaffes or if he does some things that change the nature of it, it could tighten. But right now, I think I've heard people that are even suggesting and asking some of the candidates to drop off. But then there are other candidates that surprisingly might be moving into the forefront, because I think that Vivek is getting a lot of push to move into that second place. And he is a entrepreneurial leader, I think, with some Indian ties and everything. But why do you think that these two are so much in front? And this is for anybody that has any thoughts about this, but why are they so vastly ahead, and why are we heading for this rematch of 2020? Any takes?
Biden is the incumbent, and so that's that. I mean, I wish there would be a primary and somebody else, but no, he's the incumbent. Then you have Trump, who has a dedicated diehard base. The MAGA party is not leaving Trump, but they've got a dedicated diehard base. that will stick through them thick and thin. And the trials and indictments and everything else are helping him because.
Jacoby?
What's up?
I got a question for you. Biden got more votes than Trump in the last election, correct?
Yep.
Why is he not holding rallies with all these millions of people showing up just like Trump is? If he's such a popular president.
So Lee, just
you have diehard Biden supporters. Go on.
Just to put it out there. Everybody was on Bernie Sanders and loved Bernie about how big his rallies were. He lost to Clinton. It's not all about the rallies because a lot of people don't come out for the rallies. So, yeah, sure, you can have the giant rallies, just as Trump had the giant rallies.
So when you say that Biden that Bernie Sanders lost to Clinton, I might just remind you that there was a court case between the Bernie Sanders campaign and Hillary Clinton, and the Democrats, and the court ruled that the Democrats were allowed to rig their own primaries. So it's not actually clear that Bernie Sanders lost.
It's clear.
It's also worth saying that
what happened was, Shaq, what you're doing is adding in a conspiracy theory that Bernie lost votes.
Okay, great.
Got
I'll finish my sentence. Then you can attack me for being a tinfoil hat wearing, super conservative. Now, it's also true that super delegates in Washington State disregarded the votes of certain voting groups in the primaries, and this was a complaint amongst many Democrats at that time. It's continued to be a complaint within the Democrats is what processes they should follow in their primary nominations. So I don't think that the analogy you're using between Biden and Trump is a fair analogy.
Okay, we'll take off the Bernie and Hillary Clinton one, even though Hillary got more votes, literal people votes, than Bernie. So even if you go to the actual Trump rallies that had millions of people, even in 2020, compared to Biden, when he had rallies, he did not even have the same size rallies. But Biden got more votes in 2020 than Trump. So I bringing in the conspiracy on Bernie thing doesn't change anything. The point is the rally. A lot of people don't go to the rally.
I'm just curious, when you say that it's a conspiracy, what part of what I said was incorrect?
That's not even what we're talking about.
No, but you're
that's not what we're talking about.
You're dismissing what I'm saying. You're dismissing what I'm saying
because it's not. It doesn't change my point.
What part of what I've said is not true?
What part of what you said changes my point? It doesn't.
All right, Jacoby.
Thank you. The rallies themselves, Lee, for example, the rallies themselves have the Biden having these giant rallies. It's not really it's not going to be as big as Trump's. Yes, Biden's not going to be able to have a giant rally. It's the same thing that happened in 2020, but still Biden got more votes than Trump because a lot of people don't go to these rallies. And then on top of that, I don't want to bring in the conspiracies because I just got on Shaq on the conspiracies on that. But again, Trump has these giant rallies. That's fine, but it's a matter of getting out the vote. And
you got on me about what conspiracy? What did I say that was conspiratorial? What did I say that wasn't true? Are the Democrats trying to review the process to make sure that it's fair? Is that true, or am I making it up? Is it true that there was a court case between the Biden campaign and the DNC? Is that true, or is it a conspiracy theory?
Does it change anything in what I was talking about?
So you're going to attack me for you're going to have a go at me for being a conspiracy theorist, and when I come back and you say conspiracy, your answer is, "Oh, well, it doesn't change anything I'm saying."
It doesn't.
Really?
It doesn't.
Jacoby, where is the? Because I think what Shaquille is asking, and I'm not sure that I'm quite following either. Is where is the actual conspiracy theory? Because I've definitely been on Clubhouse, so I've heard a variety of Clubhouse.
The conspiracy theory with the whole the Bernie bros was that the Democrat Party stole the election from Bernie, and yet they haven't proven that Bernie got more votes than Hillary. Hillary actually got more votes. But regardless of that, the point is you can have these giant rallies, but that doesn't change the fact that the get out the vote portion is the important piece. And more people going out to vote for a particular person, regardless of how big their rallies may be, that doesn't change anything. So you can have a big rally, but it's about to get out the vote. If you don't have the party or the votes behind you, the big rallies mean nothing. You have the showcase rally. That's it. So again, regardless of the conspiracy about the Bernie bros and the reason Bernie bros stayed home for Hillary and all this other stuff, doesn't change anything, because Bernie had bigger rallies. Hillary got more votes. Trump had bigger rallies than Hillary. Hillary got more votes, except for Trump won the Electoral College. And then in 2020, Trump had bigger rallies than Biden. Biden got more votes and won. So the rallies isn't the big thing that we should focus on. It's actually a lot of the other campaign things and thinking about the rural counties and what their mindset is. Because again, those rural people, a lot of them aren't going to those same rallies that you see in different parts of Atlanta, or South Carolina, different parts of Georgia, different parts of Tennessee to New York, and so on and so forth, where he pulls these giant rallies. A lot of those rural people, what are their mindsets in this election? Why are they following Trump? And so, yeah, that dedicated base is going to stick behind them. And those rural counties are going to stick behind them. They may not go to the rallies. They'll see it on TV. But again, it's the vote. Where the population's going.
Hey, Lee and Shaquille and everybody else, maybe even Sasha's got some thoughts. How much is the celebrity concept part of what's going on? Because to me, that's really what happens at a lot of these rallies. I know a number of people that would love to go to the rallies that might not even be supporters of folks. I remember years ago going literally to a high school, and I'm not going to say that it wasn't somebody that I backed and everything, but it was a Hillary rally, if I remember it correctly, but it was over in Raleigh, our state capital. And I remember being in a long line waiting to get in and all in that space. And I think that there are a number of people that come to these rallies more to hear the person because of their celebrity status versus being there because they are supporters. Because I think that there were even some people at that particular event, because it was held at a high school, Broughton to be exact, that they were coming. Some were coming because they were supporters, but some were coming just because they wanted to be in that celebrity grounds. Because it's in a lot of ways with some of the candidates, and I would say Trump is definitely one of them. I would say that to some degree, Obama, when he was running, had some of this as well. There's kind of this rock star mentality, and some people are coming more to see the spectacle of the show, not necessarily because they support the candidate. So how much does that play into what is going on with these big rallies? And does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I have some thoughts.
Please.
I think that normal people will never attend these rallies. That means that people who attend the rallies, they have nothing better to do. They don't want to spend time with their families. They don't want to watch sport or any interesting program or going to a concert or just do anything useful for that reason, or even just try to maintain their house and to do some repairs if needed or so on. So they are expose themselves to some demagogue, to all kind of stupid propaganda, and what they gain out of it. Okay, so they have to drive somewhere, they have to park the car, they have to go there sweating and smell the other people's sweat. For what? What are you gaining? You're becoming part of a big propaganda show, and most of it are lies anyway, and people are exposing themselves to that. They are not normal people in my books. Full stop, period.
Sasha, you say that, and even I'd love to hear Shaquille's thoughts about this, but I know people that literally went to the Moral Monday protest, which a Reverend Barber did here in North Carolina, and some of them were very adamant about the reasons that they went because of the issues that they were very much passionate about, whether that was unions, whether that was a number of other things. But I know other people that went because they were. Then, of course, there were the counter protesters, because that even happened with the recent trans bill and everything, because both sides were there protesting and or showing their support for the way that the bill went and everything. But I also know people that went because it was a spectacle that was taking place in our state capitol and they wanted to be part of what was going on. So Shaquille and even Jatovi, isn't that part of what takes place? Is that some of these people, you can say that they're bored, but they are also saying that it is a spectacle of some sort. So they are attending the spectacle. And I am a fan of Reverend Barber and all in those lines. So I can see where he was going with the Poor People's Campaign and even the Moral Monday protests. But I do know, and I think they just relaunched the second one earlier this year or latter part of last year. But I do know that people literally were going there to watch, to hear the speakers, but also to watch the spectacle and sometimes even to do counter protests. But isn't that a fair assessment that people just by nature like to go to things that are large crowd based, even if they are political? It's another show in some ways. Shaquille, Jatovi, anybody?
I guess I agree with you, Mark. A lot of people like to go for the show. I mean,
And me?
and then some people. I have a buddy who, he's a diehard Trump supporter. But yeah, he'll go to different. He tries to go to whatever rally he can, and his reasoning was that he wants to see. He wanted to be there at the rally. One, because he believed, he was a Trump supporter, but also because he wanted to see the president. So it's a it's as people are historians, and it is kind of neat to be closer to a president, to a presidential candidate. It's a part of history, so people want to be a part of it. So it's the show. Some people go for the show.
Yeah, some people go for the show, and sometimes they also go because it is a first-time experience. Because I know that we have sometimes talked about, and I know that sometimes Shaquille gets on me about this, about the role model conversation and everything. But I do know people that literally went to the first inauguration of Obama. I was one of them that went because it was the first time that a minority president had been elected. So I know people that went to that inauguration that might not have gone to the other inaugurations because it was a historical moment in time and history. So like I said, I went there and maneuvered through some political contacts I have and got a fairly decent location. I was not in the front row or anywhere near the front row, but at least I was in eye line of a very good seat in that sense. So isn't that part of what goes on as well? If there's a first time if a woman ever gets elected president, I'm sure that a number of women will be.
When have I ever said anything about people showing up to see a historical moment such as the first person from a particular group being elected to high office? When have I ever said anything about that?
No,
the
not
conversations
that
we've had previously have been about the comments that you've made and others, that students may not be able to learn anything unless the person teaching them looks like them.
Part of that conversation, that's a very abbreviated version of the entire conversation. We can get into a whole discussion about that. It could be a whole show, but part of that conversation was the role model conversation. And that's why some people went to see the inauguration, which is what I was saying, is the notion of having a role model that comes from your society or your culture. And there are a number of people that are looking for positive role models that are similar to them, whether that's women looking for women role models, whether that is African-Americans looking for African-American role models, or a number of other things. I'm not saying that you have to be of the same race or even the same religion to be a role model. I've never said that, but that's where the whole conversation was the nature of having positive role models in your own society and in your own culture. And that's where I was going when I brought up the conversation in the past. You might have seen it in a different way, but that's where I was going, was the notion of having positive role models.
Yeah, and that's fine. If that's what you look for in your life, that's absolutely fine. I personally don't look up to or admire somebody for their achievements just because they happen to be of the same ethnicity as myself. That's just not something I care about. But again, I'm not as focused on race as other people are. So,
like I said, different people have different philosophies and different thoughts and everything. Like I said, if there are folks that want to be engineers and they have not seen an African American engineer, and then they see a few African American engineers that they can see as being somebody that they can look up to because they are in the field that they want to go into. I don't see that as being problematic, but that is just
it's not problematic. I'm just saying that for me personally, I don't sit there and look at, mathematicians who are Indian and go, wow, I'm so inspired to be a mathematician. Or I never thought I could be a mathematician until I saw an Indian go before me. I don't do that. Now, if other people do that, that's up to them. It's no problem. People are free to do whatever they want. But I don't personally look at a person's achievements, then look at their ethnicity, and then say, well, because that person has some shared ethnicity with me, I'm therefore going to find that person appealing. As was suggested to me about Kamala Harris, that because she is in part Indian, I should put away my lifelong opposition to what I consider to be progressive left policies that she espoused and say, you know what, she's got the same bloodline as me, or in part, she's got a shared bloodline with me, so therefore, wow, I absolutely support her. But of course, I was called racist for saying that. So, again, I'm not that focused on race. It doesn't bother me. I don't look at a person's skin color or their ethnicity or their culture. I just try and treat people as people.
And I hear what you're saying, Shaquille, and along those same lines, there is a notion of there are people that are of the same race and the same culture that I may not necessarily like their viewpoints, but it doesn't because of their skin color. It's just that I don't like their viewpoints and everything. You and I think Lee brought up recently Thomas Sowell and everything, and I am not a big fan of Thomas Sowell's philosophy and all along those lines. Or
which one of Thomas Sowell's books have you read where you've looked at the content of that book and gone, you know what, I really don't agree with that?
I've watched some of the interviews. I'm not going to say that I've read the books. I'd be lying if I said that. But I've watched some of the interviews, and some of the viewpoints that he had were a little bit too much to the Reagan style of conservative politics that I am personally not a fan of. Just like you're not a fan of certain things, I'm not a fan of certain things. So I've heard things that he has said that did not resonate with me. If they don't resonate with me, they don't resonate. And the same with Clarence Thomas and a number of others. So I do listen to a number of people. So I've heard some of the quotes from Thomas Sowell. I've heard some of the quotes from some of the other conservative folks that are out there in various aspects of various cultures. And like I said, if they are things that I agree with, and there are even things that are within the conservative movement. I've told you that there are things even with the free enterprise zones that I am actually a fan of, and a person that I have known for a while, and Mr. McKissick was a supporter of that, and there are some other things. And so to think that I am not listening to a variety of sources and a variety of people would be a misconception and everything. So I do listen, and like I said, just like you said about your thoughts about role models, I have similar thoughts about some of the conservative politics, and there might be things that they say that I might be like, hey, I can resonate with that. They can really see something that I can relate to. There have been some of them that have talked about. Hold on a second. There have been some people that have talked about. Hold on a second. Let me finish. There have been people that have talked even in the conservative movement about gang initiations and gang affairs and things along those lines. And some of that, because of my brother's work and some of my friends' work in law enforcement, I can relate to what they are saying. Like I said, when people talk about Black Lives Matter, but they also talk about Blue Lives Matter, and meaning the law enforcement, I can relate to both sides of that. So I do have friends that are in the activism space around Black Lives Matter, but I also have friends and relatives that are in law enforcement. So I can hear some of the arguments, and they might make sense even with some of the things that they want in terms of safety and law enforcement. Now, I'm not a big fan of the paramilitary kind of weapons that certain law enforcement officers are getting. And I know that we're in the middle of a gang wars in some places, but I think that they sometimes go too far to the extreme. But that's just my personal thoughts about that.
The difference between your criticism of Black people and people of color on the right and my criticism of people on the left is that if I say I don't agree with a particular economic policy or a proposed tax policy or something like that, I run the risk of being accused of being a racist, of being a a traitor to my race, of being the, coloured face of conservatism. I get called all these names. You, on the other hand, don't get called any names when you criticise black conservatives like Thomas Sowell, or like a Supreme Court justice, or Larry Elder, who goes across to California to make a run for the governorship after Gavin Newsom was recalled. And it's published in the LA Times that he's the black face of white supremacy. I mean, I just cannot imagine how anybody could sit there and think that it's appropriate to use those sorts of terms against somebody because you don't agree with their economic philosophy or on their, on the size of government that they think they should have, or the way the government should run. So that's the difference, Mark, between you having disagreements with black conservatives and other people of color who have disagreements with, black progressives.
But Shaquille, you don't know what criticism I get. I get criticisms from my friends that are in the progressive community. Now, we don't always agree on everything, and I have friends that are very much on the socialistic side and everything. And you don't know what you don't know what kind of names.
Do they?
You don't know what kind of names they might have.
Well, I'm asking you. Do they call you racist? Do they say that you're a traitor?
Shaq, many people from the Republican side. Shaq, I'm jumping in here because you
don't ever let me jump in on a conversation that you're having with somebody.
I do. You did earlier. Shaq, again, you cannot generalize and say that, oh, well, this individual doesn't get any criticism because I get all the criticism. I mean, we all get criticism for having our own personal views. It happens. Sasha gets it. Lee gets it. Mark gets it. We all get it. And I get that you get offended. You've been called racist. Nobody here is calling you that. So, I've been called a slave to the Democrat Party and stuff like that just for having my political views. And I don't really even try to identify even as a Democrat. However, I get called a slave to the Democrat Party by people of my own race telling me this. And I've been told, hey, by others, we all get criticism. And I think where we started this conversation was that representation matters. And it matters to people in various ways. Even though you may not see race or whatever, and that's whatever you found for inspiration for your representation that inspires you, that's great. But for others, like for example, if you take it, when President Obama got elected, tons of people went to his inauguration. Some of them don't even believe in his political views, but a lot of Black people went because of that inspiration that he gave him. A lot of Black people actually were excited with Ben Carson because Ben Carson he was one of the first big time Black surgeons. And honestly, that gave a lot of inspiration to a lot of people going into the medical field, even though they had different views politically. So representation matters to people in various different ways. And we cannot pigeonhole it down to our personal gripes and grimaces where, okay, well, we got called this one day or a few days and we feel so bad. So all those on this side attack these people, even though, you may agree. No, that's not the way that it works, especially here. And I think, and Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I think that's what you're trying to express is that.
Yeah, that's correct.
Is that, hey, you got called that, but I'm not calling you that.
Right. Exactly.
We have different representation that inspires us.
Yeah, that is exactly where I was going and everything along those lines. I know we've only got a few more minutes to go. I don't know if Sasha wants to chime in as well. The other thing I was going to make it a reference to different things that are going on in the world because I hadn't got to the China news, but apparently China is making it harder for its Muslim citizens to go to Mecca or anywhere else for that matter. So that is definitely a country that is doing a crackdown in that sense. And I know that there are other people that are doing crackdowns as well. As a matter of fact, we had a whole conversation on Sharice's show yesterday about migration and all along those lines. And then I also saw that in Haiti, some of the Haitian gang folks, and I mentioned the gang stuff that goes on, are vowing to fight any foreign armed forces if it commits abuses. So they're saying if you can come down here if you want to and try to enforce your will, but if you do it and we think that there are abuses, that there might be some repercussions, and that could be very problematic depending on what the foreign forces are and all in that kind of space. And like I said, I was curious and that's the first thing I brought up earlier, what folks thought about this water shortage, because that does seem like we all are majority water, and water is very vital to our being. So that was the first story that I saw today that really caught my eye, because if there is a shortage of water, or if we lose water, then our existence as humans, all of this discussion would be a moot point, because we need water to survive and live and everything. So water is a very vital element in our life, and so I would be concerned about the water shortage. But Sasha, I don't know if you got anything you want to bring into that discussion, or any of the other discussions, or even what's going on in Ukraine, Russia. We still have about 5 or 6 more minutes, but definitely wrapping up the conversation, but another lively one as always. But I'm turning the floor over to you, Sasha.
There is a very interesting news came out of International Chess Federation. We're going to do chess recording in 5 minutes. So what's interesting here is that they banned total 100% of all transgender women to play in a women's tournament. So what that means that these people, they obviously by definition cannot play in men's tournament. However, now they are deprived of their rights, so-called, I don't know, rights or implied rights or whatever it might be, to play in women's tournaments. So where are they going to play? They probably will have to create their own tournaments to play with, how they will call them, transgenders only tournament. And there will be probably a world champion among transgender people. So there will be men's champion, women's champion, and transgender champion. Welcome to the new brave world of chess. That's how it's done. I don't know if serious organization like International Chess Federation came up with this, and they know that they are exposing themselves to all kinds of lawsuits and complaints and so on. Anyway, they've done it.
But they're going to expose themselves to lawsuits if they don't do it. What are you going to do? You can't go into China and, the Middle East and, Russia and I won't say Russia, Eastern Europe, and, have a biological male who identifies as a female playing in a female's competition. That's just not going to fly in those countries. And it's not going to fly in most of Africa. It's not going to fly in big parts of Asia. It's just, what are they supposed to do?
Is it going to fly in the United States?
Well, it's probably the only place where it does fly is the Western world, US, Canada, the UK, Australia these days, New Zealand. I mean, unfortunately, this issue about what we should do with trans athletes and trans, say athletes if you want to include chess in that, what do you do? What's the fair and reasonable thing to do? They should have the right to compete. But do they have their advantage or disadvantage against other players?
I'm not familiar with the position of, for example, Canadian Chess Federation or even US, but I'm pretty sure if there would be a women-only tournament and there would be a transgender player, all other women players will quit the tournament. They're not going to play.
Does it really fly in the US?
We haven't seen that, Sasha. We haven't seen that in other sports. We've still seen female competitors, but I think the issue is whether or not there's an advantage. And when it comes to chess, this is going to be a real hot button. I can see this becoming a real hot button issue very, very quickly, because chess is not something which is physically demanding. Chess is about strategy and mind and mathematics. Now, the fact of the matter is that the average male chess player is higher than the average female chess player in ratings. So the argument would be what? If you include trans people into these groups and say there is no difference between, mental capacity between the two genders, then why do we have a male and female group in the first place? If you say that females need to have their own group because they're not as good at chess as males.
That's exactly the case.
Well, statistically, that appears to be the case, but I imagine that would be a very controversial position to take in today's world.
Yeah, no doubt about that and everything.
Sure.
Yeah, and we're going to get off and have the recording of the chess show that'll actually air on Saturday and all along those lines. And it'll be interesting to see even how the bills that passed, because literally they vetoed the governor's initiative here in North Carolina, and then having the supermajority here in North Carolina, they were able to veto it. So it is now law. The different trans laws the rules around the trans population are now law unless they get to the Supreme Court level and all along those lines. So it'll be interesting to see how this is going to pursue and which direction it's going to pursue, because I know the ACLU and others are saying that they will take it all the way up to the high court. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out and all along those lines. We're going to end the show. I was going to ask Shaquille really quickly if he was having any thoughts or regrets over the loss in Australia, because I do know that he was an avid fan of the Matildas and they did not make it to the finals. So it's going to be England against Spain, but they did much better than the U.S. did and some of the other favorites. So I know that it was probably with regret that you saw that they did not make it to the championship. But hey, making it to the semifinals is nothing to be ashamed of. They did a great run and all along those lines. But I don't know if you had any thoughts of their loss and their success, because they definitely went further than some people were thinking the Matildas would go. I think that's the nickname y'all have for them and everything.
Well, firstly, I'm a British Australian, so I mean, those are my two teams, right? The England and Australia. Look, to be honest with you, I wish the ladies the best of luck in their future endeavours, and those that remain, I wish them the best of luck. I've never enjoyed soccer. I don't watch it as a general rule. It's pretty rare for me to watch it, and I didn't feel compelled to watch this. So I don't know exactly what happened other than what people tell me. It's just not one of the sports that I generally watch. Same as cricket. I don't watch the men's soccer. I don't watch the female soccer. Same as the cricket. I don't watch the games generally. So
Gotcha. Well, I think it's England against Spain in the finals, but we're going to get on out of here. Another lively discussion, and we'll have another one on tomorrow. I think we have some guests coming next week. I got to remember who they are, but definitely going to get on out of here and another lively discussion.